something. He's the guy in the Lost Boys movies that's like wearing no shirt and like playing the saxophone. He's like very muscular. That's the song. So I was like, I'm gonna look at those vampire movies and stuff that I used to watch all the time. See if what I think of them now. Yeah.
Could actually take these off.
Welcome to Spiritual Revolution. Today, we're going to be discussing the sunk cost fallacy, and more specifically, how to avoid the spiritual costs of the sunk cost fallacy. I would like to welcome my little panel here, Joanna, Lee, and Michael, who will be engaging in questions, answers, and I hope more questions so that we can get to the bottom of this. So what do you guys think? Have you ever heard of the sunk costs fallacy? Michael said that he hadn't heard of it till recently. So what about you guys?
I looked it up right before the meeting to see what it was. So I hardly understand it.
So can you explain it since you looked it up?
All right, I'm going to try. I think it is when a company has put in a lot of money and resources into something and it's failing and they just continue to put money into it because they put a lot into it already.
Yeah, but that happens in more than just companies. That happens like in relationships, in education, in jobs. Think about like those people who, I'm just adjusting my light because I saw like weird shadows. Think about those people who like have worked in one company for 30 years and they're super unhappy, but they don't know what to do to make it better for themselves.
Right.
Or
That makes sense.
20 years with the same dude and not being happy, trying to scoot as far away from him every night as you can on the mattress. But yet not doing anything about it and not being brave to step out and jump off the cliff.
So in other words, it's basically you've sunk all the your cost into something and you're afraid to get out of it because you think you've put too much into it to get out of it.
Yeah, it's like I think that people think of their resources as finite, right? And so like I only have 40 years to live and I've already spent 30 with this one guy. I couldn't possibly leave now. I don't have any more life left in me because it's only 10 left. You know what I mean? Whereas life is infinite and can change on a dime, and you can live 4 lifetimes in a month sometimes, or you can live, one in 20 years.
I think to some degree, everybody is falling for this fallacy because in a lot of ways, it's all of our limiting and false beliefs that we have adopted, that whether we know them or not, and what our good what our habits are that we employ on a daily basis are that are actually giving us, positive returns versus negative returns. If the things that we're doing are harmful in nature at some level, shape, or form to ourselves or to other people, whether we know it or not, we should be changing those ideas. But for whatever reason, we just, we say, well, we did that yesterday, so that's what we're going to do today. And
Yeah.
to some degree, that's the that's the other thing is like being able to distinguish between what's in the past and what can influence the future, and how our investments of time in the current in the current make a difference in the future versus how we've done things in the past.
I think that what we should do right now is to do a round robin of questions. Each one of us can ask a question to the next person. And I have a question for Lee. What is the spiritual effect of the sunk cost fallacy? Like, how does that kind of thinking affect your spirituality and your power to create reality?
Similar to what Michael described, we as human beings often find it attractive to follow what we consider at the time to be a pattern of least resistance or a path of least resistance. And we are aware of this word called habit. And many of us will define our day to day activities as habits, and then perhaps positive or negative, depending on how we evaluate what we're doing with our time. I recently became aware of a gentleman who talks of and teaches others about following their intuition. And I find his work intriguing because I remember myself discussing with people how much I valued my intuition. And I saw it as a way to get away from what I was handed by public education, by my family, and people that I had known at that time. And so I was attracted to that. I wanted to be away from logic because mathematics and logic didn't seem attractive to me at all. And I felt that I wanted to be more spiritual, um, because I was also raised a Roman Catholic. And so I wanted to be away from structure, and I wanted to rely on my feelings, my connection to everything around me. If I had followed my intuition more often or focused on that earlier on, now I'm 48. So if I had done this for the last 20 years, I have a feeling that I would have discovered that the path of least resistance was really listening to my intuition. And it was not, the path of least resistance was not doing or repeating things that I had done in the past, especially ones that did not seem to be successful. And for me, that all relates to spirituality and my own personal spiritual revolution.
Okay, now it's your turn to ask a question to the next person. Choose your victim and your question.
All right. Okay. Okay. Michael, what is the name of this effect that is the topic of your show? Could you remind me what it's called, please?
Sunk cost fallacy.
Dunk?
Sunk. You sunk money into something, or you sunk your
Oh,
investment.
now it all makes sense. Sunk cost, right. Sunk. Oh my gosh. I was thinking, is that somebody's name? I was like, what is that? I got it. Thank you for pronouncing that so clearly that I can understand. Sunk cost fallacy. Okay. So for yourself, Michael, have you seen your past activities? Because there's no point talking about yeah. In your past, have you participated or threw an energy into the sunk cost fallacy in your own life?
Yeah, I think we all do, and to some degree, I think of my you know, kind of false belief of the idea in the military that we're doing something that's defending freedom. And so when I joined up when I was 17, my inclination was that I was paying my debt to society, up front, so that I was basically making an investment in our society with the idea that I'm going to ensure freedom for my period of time, and then I can move on to my objectives. And obviously I thought we were doing something noble and honorable, and obviously we weren't. But it took a lot of time to get to that point. And I don't really think that actually occurred to me till probably like 2015 or something like that. So we're talking 1986, or even before that, as a child. But serving in the military from 1985 to 1994, and even though I saw it as a pretty much a prison sentence, I still felt like there was a reasoning for that, for the country to do that. But at this point, knowing what I know now, I know it's completely, a useless endeavor because it isn't what it's purported to be. Unfortunately, I see a lot of people falling for the same thing. Well, we've got to have a national defense. And of course, national defense is one of those reasons that, people justify the government. But the reality is that there is no real national defense. The people that we're really being, the majority of people are being victimized by are not people in other countries, but people within our own country. So, I don't know if that's a good example, but that's one. So my
Have you
turn.
seen the movies called Sicario? There's Sicario 1 and Sicario 2.
What?
Movie Sicario.
Oh, okay, movie. Okay.
I don't know if I've seen that one.
So the movie is mostly shot in Mexico, but it begins in Arizona. So the FBI raid a home on the outskirts of a city in Arizona, and they find many bodies hidden within the walls, like something like 42. And so this sets the movie off as in they're in a new escalated war against the Mexican cartels, and that's the whole thing. Yeah, and then the CIA is involved, and then this FBI woman, she's brought in just so that they have a get out of jail free card for the CIA guys, so that they can say we operated in cooperation with the domestic agency. So she's there as window dressing, and so that's how they portray the whole thing. But they're all over back and forth over the border, and you can see that there's a close relationship with all those foreign elements, so to speak. And the amount of material and weapons, it's just phenomenal. So when you speak of defense, self-defense, I think it's just I do you feel today that how can we really trust any of that, and that anyone who thinks that whatever is in the movie or portrayed as the propaganda is the reality, I can't even see myself having a conversation with that person.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is once you start down the rabbit hole of how much propaganda have I actually consumed, what do I actually believe? The reality is that most of the stuff is propaganda, and it's a con man's paradise that we live in, and propagandists are like at the top of the food chain. So, everything that we see, everything that we've consumed, everything that's been repeatedly repeated to us is suspect. And certainly the things that have been repeated more than the things that have been repeated less are the things that we need to be really suspicious of. So, like, for example, how many zombie movies have you watched, Joanna?
No, I think I see a zombie movie every time I go to the store these days, but I actually haven't watched a real zombie movie because I don't need to watch a zombie movie. It's happening right in my city.
But hang on, Michael, it's your turn. So, hey, Sydney, we're doing a round robin question and answer on sunk cost fallacy and the spiritual costs and how to avoid the pitfalls of the sunk cost fallacy. And now Michael has just answered a question. So it's his turn to ask a question to a chosen participant.
Okay, I'll give anyone a choice. You can answer this one, Joanna, or you don't want to answer it, anybody else can answer it. But Agnieszka
Yes.
mentioned that this is something that affects relationships too. So in a lot of cases, people are in bad relationships and they've invested their time and they're thinking, well, eventually they're going to change. Has that situation occurred in your life where you've had a relationship that you had invested time and effort into and thought it was going to change, and then made that assumption that, well, I put so much time in, we just got to push a little harder. Have you had that circumstance? And
Me.
what was your, yeah, well, you
Oh,
can
yeah,
answer.
sure, sure. I have had that experience. Um, but I was very mentally, spiritually ill at that time, so I couldn't get out of it. Um, and so I think I told myself that story just to bolster my um, inability to get out of it. But I did spiritual work and was able to get out of it. But I would say that,
Can you clarify what story you were telling yourself?
well, I definitely believed that he was going to change. If only he would change, then everything would be great. If only he would do what I want him to do, everything would be great. And but it was an impossible situation. So, but what it turned out was that I was actually using him to hide out behind because he was so obviously dysfunctional that no one could see how dysfunctional I was. So I was using the situation as a way to not have it not be obvious how I. Oh, I think I'm making too much noise. Yeah, okay. I can't talk because he can hear me. Sorry. I'll just
Well,
have
that's
to.
answer, nevertheless.
Sorry.
You got almost done. Maybe after in 10 minutes he'll be finished. Is he finished?
Just so everyone knows, Joanna is being
No.
kind and considerate for her partner. That person's teaching a class. It's not that she's afraid to be found out or that she's in a relationship that is scary. She's actually in a great relationship with someone she cares very much about, and she's just being careful that that person's call is not in, what's the word? Negatively affected.
Disrupted. Disrupted, I think, is a good word. Yes, and we totally understand, Joanna. All right, but it was your turn to ask somebody a question. Okay, well, who wants to take over for Joanna and ask a question? How about Sydney? Do you have a question? Or are you just passively observing today? I'll take his lack of answer as passively observing. Feel free to chime in at any time. All right, so what do you like? It's too bad Joanna can't participate. I keep wanting to ask you things. But what do you guys, so it's a tempting thing, the sunk cost fallacy, right? So just to reiterate for Sydney and for anybody who's joining in at this time, the sunk cost fallacy is the belief that you've invested so much time, effort, energy, emotion, or whatever into a situation that you cannot get out. You have to continue on the chosen path, even if it's totally uncomfortable, even if there are brambles and pitfalls and even if it like whacks you over the head 6 times a day, you still have to continue on this path because this is the right thing to do, because that's what you decided 25 or 5 or 2 or 3 years ago, and you're going to continue on that same path. And so it's interesting because there is, our ego is there to protect us, right? Our it's the seat of power, but at the same time, it's a safety mechanism. The ego is a safety mechanism, right? And the ego perceives everything that's already happened before that you've survived as safe, and it brings up the evidence for that. It's safe because you've survived. That's just how it is. It's obviously safe because you obviously survived. You're still here, and it considers anything that you've never experienced before, no matter how benign, as possibly dangerous, which is also true because it is possibly dangerous. But in that way, it often creates these tempting situations to not get out of something and not step into danger or unknown or scary stuff, but to stay in your little safe cocoon of brambles. Michael?
Well, I think she brought up a great point there about, in a lot of cases, I think, like people that are in jobs or in professions that they've invested years of college and potentially years of experience. And although they hate the job, they are, you know, they have put so much time in. I know I probably shouldn't mention this, but I'm going to. But my sister became a doctor in her early 40s. It took her that long to get this done. She was very proud of that fact. But then when she actually started practicing, she didn't like it. There's a lot of things about it that she just didn't like. And, she's kind of in the circumstance these days where that's where all her money, all her time, all her investment, practically a good portion of her adult life went into. And yet
She doesn't like
she's,
it.
working on houses now. I mean, I definitely give her credit for doing something she's makes her happier, but to some degree she struggles with it because she does feel like she's wasted a lot of time. And unfortunately, the way that the system is kind of built in a lot of ways when it comes to education and so forth, they don't tell you what the circumstances are. They don't they don't like in a master apprenticeship type of role, you get a chance to like participate in whatever it is you're doing at a very early stage. And you either get an idea of, oh, I like that, or no, I don't. Well, in today's world, you don't get that until especially with doctors and these highly educated fields, you don't ever actually get into the field to do that profession until you're, you know, 20 years into schooling.
That's interesting because I was watching this video. I've been watching these videos about living in Mexico just to see if there's anything I'm missing that I should check out or try or whatever. And this girl said that in Mexico, when they went to the emergency room, when there were tests that they needed to pay for, they were told how much the tests were going to cost right up front, and they paid for the tests and then they got them. But in US, they would have gotten all these tests done, everything would have been done for them. And at the end, they would have found out that they're in debt $50,000 or $60,000, astronomical figures. And the guy actually said something similar to what you just said. They wait, they give you everything to make sure that you spend as much money as possible, and then they tell you how much you're in debt for. And so that's
Yeah,
like with the doctors, they don't give you practicum right off the bat. They give you practicum after several years, right?
which suggests how effective this is, because essentially they're utilizing this in a lot of different ways to get people down the wrong path and then let them, because this even works in the stock market and certainly in gambling and stuff like that. They kind of create the circumstance where people are like, I was just watching there was a cryptocurrency thing, and they were saying, you're better off betting against MSNBC's advice on crypto because like 95% of the time they're wrong. And so like at the very high of the last time the Bitcoin thing went up, and MSNBC was saying, this is the time to buy Bitcoin. And so then all these people bought in to Bitcoin at the high when MSNBC recommended, of course, and then they had a bad experience. And so it's interesting that that's the way it's been going. And of course, like right now, they're, I guess, advising not to buy, or like it's gonna tank or whatever. So maybe that's a good time to buy cryptocurrency. But in any case, I would suggest there is a lot of evidence to suggest that this fallacy is one that is utilized quite a bit. And you posted a Time article about this, and in that article they said that people were told that they were given they like a poll or whatever. And they said, what, somebody gives you 2 airplane tickets, one to Montreal in the wintertime and one to Cancun. But then they were told that the cost of the airline ticket to Montreal was $800, and the cost of the Cancun trip was $200. And guess which most people picked? The one to
No,
Montreal.
in the winter. No, don't do it.
Because the comparison, because the cost comparison, they think they're
But
losing more money.
The Montreal has that underground cities. They could still shop there because they couldn't go outside.
Then there was another one where they said that the cake that they were eating was really expensive, and so even though they were full, they ate more of the cake that was expensive than the cake that was cheap.
And it was the same cake, wasn't it?
I don't know about that particular one, but just the fact that they were told that something is more expensive, people tend to move towards that. And so in a lot of cases, I think you see this in government a lot, where they say, well, we've invested $30 million in this school, or we've invested $100 million in this stadium. And, there's some overruns and stuff, but, we got to throw in another 50 million or something like that. And everybody's like, oh yeah, we got to finish it.
Yeah, it's just like that ice cream that says, is the best ice cream in Bonneville. So everybody thinks it's the best ice cream, but obviously Santa Clara is the better one.
Okay.
Been buying Santa Clara in the mall. So good. All right. So Lawrence joined us. Lawrence, do you want to participate in the discussion or just listen? Because I have questions for you if you want to talk. There's no unmute action on Lawrence's part. So
well, I'd love to have a spiritual thing, but it was actually something on Lee's show. Right at the end there, Bobby chimed in, talking about being is it a Buddhist monk? I want to make sure I get it
It's
right.
not a Buddhist monk, he's a Buddhist practitioner.
Okay. But the idea of, he was suggesting that egoism is one of the things that most of us suffer from.
But the way Buddhists understand ego and the way I just described ego are 2 different egos, I believe. But anyway, go on.
Well, this idea of self-centeredness, like that we live for our own experience versus living for an experience that might include everyone else, I think is something to consider. And certainly for me, I when I come up against an ideology like that, I'm very interested, because it's, it does speak to some of the things that I think we do get wrong. And I do see, a lot of people kind of justifying their situation because of their own beliefs, their own experience. And they just, continue because they don't know any other way. And this is kind of one of the things that I think, because we're becoming a more isolated society, where we don't converse and really examine other people's points of view, we do fall victim to the sunk cost fallacy simply because we don't know other points of view that might be better or might suit us better, or don't know how they might suit us better because we're just not familiar with them.
But it doesn't have to be wrong. Like, I'm a little struggling with whether I really believe this or not. But I think that we should allow people to be as messed up as they want. And if they want to shift, if they want to rejoin, like what Lee says on his show, come back to the family, right? But if they don't want to come back, I don't think we should drag them by the hair, kicking and screaming. I think we
Well, I
should
don't-
allow them the choice.
Certainly.
What if
It's that opportunity to make a choice, like which is better.
But what if that's the experience that they signed up for? What if that's what they want at this time? They want to experience this kind of contrast as opposed to this kind of contrast, as opposed
How
to
do they
that
know
kind
that?
of.
How do they know
Well, they
that?
know that before they're born, right?
But how do they
They
know
would-
that?
Well, that's the whole point, is that you don't know that. The whole
Are you
point is
sure?
that you wake up with amnesia. You don't know what happened before when you were born, and you have to figure it out anyway. That's the name of the game. That's how it
That-
works.
That's buried behind a whole bunch of trauma. Who knows?
Yeah, but
for
the
sure?
trauma is also by design, right? The trauma is what guides you on the path, on your chosen path, to overcome the obstacles that you've chosen for yourself. The trauma being some of the obstacles.
I'm not so sure.
Well,
I mean, of course, everybody's belief system is slightly different. And all that.
So I guess you're saying kind of like, would it be wrong for someone like, say, Mark Passio to get upset with people because they're not, they're not getting with the program and everything's getting worse? Would he be wrong to get mad and vent about
I don't
that?
think it's wrong for Mike Pasio to do it, because that's his path, and him getting upset about it is the right thing for him. But I
Okay.
don't necessarily think that everybody should suddenly drop what they're doing and follow Mark Passio just because Mark Passio says that.
No, I
Because
know.
everybody has their own discernment, right? We're born with discernment. We're born with free will. That is one of the characteristics. And if you want to be a fucked up child abuser all your life, then you should be that. Like that's.
But how
I'm
do,
not
how do
saying
you
we
know
should.
if that's what you want? If you don't have choices, if you don't have alternatives, if you don't know what your options are, how do
But
you
I
know?
just said we're born with free will. We can look it up. We can figure it out. We have. Everybody has the
Free will
opportunity.
means choices, though. You got to have an awareness of choices to, and I think that's maybe the thing is like making the offer.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not
Creating
saying
an
that you
offer.
shouldn't try to wake the people up. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, like, you shouldn't care about their awakening. I'm just saying that if they don't wake up, don't like get all emotional about it, because just, maybe they weren't there yet. Try again in a month or whatever.
Yeah, I get you. That's such a not a bad outlook on it. Yeah, I noticed that because I like to think for myself, and part of what comes with thinking for myself is that I may go against a big wave of opinion that is this way, and here, and or both sides that I believe that, or not believe, but I see don't have the complete picture, missing pieces of the puzzle, and then, but I agree with certain parts on each side, weave it together kind of in my own way to think, and because I think for myself. But a lot of people seem to just want to polarize and become an echo chamber and not really think for themselves, just doing it because the next guy says it. But it's a lot harder when you think for yourself, and you have to go up against so much opinion that is kind of crafted one way, and that's the pain that comes along with thinking for yourself, I guess.
when you're describing Mark, I was thinking that he has a right to the consequences and the joys of his actions.
Yeah.
So if he was walking around Philadelphia and every time he saw somebody wearing a mask, he punched him in the face, then he's gonna have to deal with that.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
he is walking around Philadelphia and every time he sees someone without a mask on, gives them a hug after he
Mhm.
says, "Hey, I'm so happy to see your face and your smile. May I give
Yeah.
you a hug?" Then he
Yeah.
gets that choice too. The other thing is, I want to call on the wisdom of people who are more that are like examples to me. And one of them is a person I've never met, and that's the grandmother of Dr. Shiva in Massachusetts. And he described his grandmother being asked why she didn't go to the temple, she didn't spend time going to church. I asked, she was a healer in their village in southern India. And she replied, "Why would I need to go to those buildings? Everything you need is inside you." So I can let go of all my fears about people not seeing the message or the right movie or the right book or the right conversation. And I can let all of that go because it's not my fight. Now, if I meet someone and they ask me a question or I say something and they're like, "That's interesting," then sure, I will take that on. Or I can tell my mother, "If you would like to talk about my understanding of our situation, just let me know."
Mhm.
I will do that, but I don't need to hold on to the fear that they won't get the message or they won't get their awakening moment. That is not on me.
Yeah, it's an inner battle. It's not an outer battle. And you are presented with the information that you need in order to meet all of the milestones on your journey. And if you don't meet one, the information is just presented again and again and again from different sources, the same information, the same message until you get it. It's very tight system.
Are you saying we get a repeat of the lesson in our life if we hadn't learned it? Is that what you just said?
I believe so. I've seen that in my life.
I agree.
You know,
I've seen that
and
in my
maybe
life
not
too.
even if you haven't learned it, but maybe like a higher level, like, you know, you go through like level 1 and then you level 2 and level 3 and level 4, and it's like, whoa, this is getting strange. But as a matter of fact, every time you go up a level, you are better at dealing with it and better at being resilient to the situation, right?
Sense. What if you wanted to do things over? Like, you know how you sometimes in life you might say like, "Oh man, I wish I could have done that all over again. I would have done it so differently." Do you
Why
think
would
that?
you want that?
Huh?
Why would you want that?
Well, because if you wanted a certain outcome, if you wanted something to work out that you didn't think worked out,
But
would
is that outcome best for you because it didn't work out? It's probably not
what
best.
if you wanted to though?
Yeah, but like
What if your heart tells you? What
you
if
know
your
what
heart
that's
tells
called?
what?
I'll tell you what that is. Good. There's good a tight little name for it. It's really nice.
What is it?
It's wrapped up in a little. It's called arguing with reality.
Hmm. Okay.
Right? There is a reality, and
Yeah.
you just don't accept it, and that can lead to insanity if you do it too intensely. Just saying.
You have to adapt.
Well, and of course, but the thing is, I think that the lessons that come to us are the right lessons for us for the right moment, right?
Otherwise,
And
we wouldn't be there, right?
exactly, because there is like you have a higher plan for your life. You're not haphazardly put on earth and thrown into like a bucket of trolls and told to fight your way out. I don't think that's how it is. I think that there is like a Joanna is having it. Don't laugh so hard. You're too loud, Joanna.
What about I forgot what I was gonna say. I don't
But
know.
it's like a path. I think that we lay out a path for ourselves, right? Like before we're born, we decide what the greater challenges and the great opportunities of the lifetime will be, so we can have like, you know,
Yeah.
this type of experience or that type of experience.
Yeah, but you say that like you know that for a fact, but that's not necessarily true
I
for
mean,
everyone. It might be
I,
true for you.
well, of course, it's an inner battle. How could I possibly talk on behalf of anybody other than me? That's impossible. It's physically impossible. Like
But
literally
you said
impossible.
you
Well,
said you.
you can only talk about you, and I can only talk about me. You have no entrance into this world, and I have no
You
entrance
used the
into
word
that.
you. when you described that. You said you learn, or you choose the life that you want at the beginning.
That's what I believe, that that's true for me and for you and for everybody. That's what I believe. You don't have to believe the same thing I do, and I don't have to believe the same thing you do, but that is what I believe.
Oh yes, yeah,
I mean,
that's
I can
fine.
tell you why I believe it if that makes you feel better, but it's just what I believe.
Yeah, that's fine. And
Why,
you're
why do you believe that?
For me,
Yeah.
what did you say? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Why do you believe that?
Oh, I believe that because I used to be a little bit in the dark about my purpose and how, like, I've always known that there was a greater purpose, but I met certain people and I had certain experiences that sort of clarified that for me. And the first one of those experiences was meeting my first husband and his family and learning about how he used to remember his past life in this lifetime. And I interviewed like 30 different people from his family. Like, I wanted to know everything there was about the 3-year-old that remembered stuff that a 3-year-old shouldn't know. You know what I mean? That talked about how cars are made and how bees procreate and all of this stuff. Whereas, like, none of his family were educated enough to know any of this. And so that was an interesting exploration. And after I interviewed his whole family, we were married for 7 years. So I had a lot of like opportunity to talk to different family members and stuff. After that, I believed in reincarnation for sure. I believed in that, and it made so much more sense. Like, you know, and everybody remembered it differently, and it was sort of like a puzzle that I put together, like what he knew and why he knew it and why he said these things, and he said this to me and he said this to me, and it was sort of like a mapping out of this little kid's experiences in a different lifetime. And the second thing that happened was um, when I was at coaching school and I was doing my coaching certification, there was a neurolinguistic programming and past life regression teacher. Well, neurolinguistic programming teacher that also did past life regression, and he was a Hawaiian shaman, and we became really close friends. And he used to do a lot of past life regressions, and so for like my other friends and stuff. And I asked him one time and he said, no, you don't need me to do it for you. You can do it yourself. And I was quite shocked. I didn't know what he meant. I didn't know why he thought I could do it, where he didn't think the other people could do it. But that night when I fell asleep, I had some memories and they were very specific. And since then, I've had different memories of a different lifetime that happened, you know, during when I was awake and when I was asleep. And then I also paid somebody else for a past life regression. And a lot of the memories that when I was hypnotized actually coincided with the ones that I remembered on my own. It was like a different puzzle piece of the same lifetime and stuff. So that was interesting. And pretty much I'm comfortable believing that those were my past lives and that I experienced them. In my mind, there is still a shadow of a doubt whether these past lives belong to the human consciousness as a whole or me as an individual. But I do like to think of myself as an individual experiencing and building upon these different lifetimes in order to create like a well-rounded education system for myself. That's how I look at it.
Okay, well, are you willing to examine a different perspective?
Why would you question my religious beliefs? Like, why can't
No,
it be okay
well,
that I believe
I'm
that I
just saying,
believe?
are you willing to examine a different perspective?
Sure, you're gonna tell me I didn't have past lives?
No, I'm just saying from my experience, I kind of view the world as a curious adventure. And the idea that what happened yesterday doesn't necessarily determine what happens tomorrow.
Okay.
And so if I'm basing my experience, like everything on my experiences and not considering that there might be other options, I may be losing out on something. So
So
like,
far, I
for
agree with you
example, like
100%.
with my Army experience, I could say the same thing. I believed in the Army thing. I believed in what I was doing up until the point that I didn't. And I saw the things that changed my mind. And when I changed my mind, I had I started a new adventure. There's a lot of people that basically said, no, don't do that. You're ruining your career. You're halfway through this mess. Just stick it out. But
Yeah, so you're back talking about the sunk cost fallacy, but I don't believe my spiritual belief in reincarnation and the path that I laid out.
But the possibility exists.
But I don't disagree with anything you said. I believe it's an adventure. I don't believe that what I did yesterday matters today. But I do believe that knowing what happened before helps me become a better person today and helps me explain some of the things like irrational fears that I might have. Oh, it's not irrational and then it's easier to get over it and overcome it because it's no longer irrational because it happened, but it happened, 500 years ago. So it's no longer something to worry about. Poof, it's gone. It helps me be a better person, more adventurous and more experienced, like living more fully rather than less fully.
Well, I would just say it speaks to being very humble because we've got to be one in which there's always that opportunity to examine what's happened in the past may not be what happens in the future or may not relate to what happened in the future.
And sometimes our understanding grows about a perception we had, sometimes it's just growth as well. I'm sorry, guys, I jumped in late. Hi, Ignacio. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Some of you may or may not be aware, but there's a game that just came out this year called Cyberpunk 2077. And in this video game, a part of the gameplay is that you can relive the memories of the dead. And so someone was in a crime or something like that. Someone's got this chip taken out of this person's body. And I'm thinking, how sad, because if there's someone who that is their dream to, like get a chip from a memory, relive the life of a billionaire or a celebrity, female superstar, porn star, who knows what it could be, or murder, all that kind of stuff, then they've negated their own life, their own struggle, their own adventure. Michael, you talked about a curious adventure. I would not, I will not trade my life or adventure for someone else's. I say, good for you, good for her, good for them. But I like my adventure.
Absolutely.
Well, it sounds like it's someone who wants, it seems to me, and that goes into like the idea of like the idea of transhumanism. It seems it's another escape route, someone who maybe hasn't, that's for me. Like, I think we all have it where whatever it may be, I could grab this or whatever, grab that. It's kind of a way of getting out of, being here, So I think, yeah, sometimes it's that simple for me,
Yeah. So how can we avoid pitfalls of the sunk cost fallacy, James?
I'm sorry?
How can we avoid the pitfalls of the sunk cost fallacy?
Oh, I don't know what the sunk cost fallacy is.
Who wants to explain the sunk cost fallacy this time? Adam?
What is it called?
The sunk
cost fallacy.
I don't recall.
Explain it, Michael. You can do a good job.
Okay, you've invested time, money, and effort into a particular way of doing things or a particular methodology.
Okay.
And because you've invested so much time and energy, you continue to invest more time and energy in it because you've invested so much time and energy in it.
And there's a perceived outcome that you're expecting. There's an expectation of an outcome. Well, but that's the thing. If you have no expectation of an outcome, then you're just going with it.
Well, it's like if you started your car like 10 times and it wouldn't start, and you just keep hitting the button again because you're saying, well, I've tried it, but
I don't have a button. I still have a key.
I've been trying it for 10
time.
minutes. 10 more minutes, it'll happen. Already spent 10 minutes trying to turn it on. I'm just going to continue.
And maybe it'll just be this next time, or maybe it's the lottery ticket. You've played the lottery 50 years and you've never won, but maybe it's this next time. I've put so much time and effort into this. I've got to win, and I can't stop now because that may be my lucky chance.
Well, the whole system is really that, right?
Exactly, it is.
I mean, I'm in high school. Okay, I'm gonna do this because I want to get into college, or I got to do this to get over there. So then I do this. I'm going through this. I have whatever this routine is, or I go to this guy and he's gonna show me how to do this to get there, and then I'm gonna do that thing to get there, and then I'm never here because I'm always planning to go over there, that kind of thing,
So how can you stay here?
Huh?
How
Yeah,
can you stay here?
yeah.
That was a question. How
Oh,
can you?
how? That I'm here
Yeah.
because I'm here. I'm not in my head thinking that I, I I think it's related to images. Like if I have a fixed idea in my head, right? It may be from the past, and I'm using that fixed idea in the past to be here in the moment with you, but I'm not really here with you because I'm doing something to get over there. So I'm constantly I have the idea. It's really just I'm augmenting an idea rather than my being present with you. So if I can be present with you, I'm present with you, and then that's it.
Yeah, I agree. But I don't think that remembering or working with your past life experiences or past life memories takes away from the experiencing of the present. I think it's just more information. It doesn't necessarily add or subtract. Maybe it adds, but I'm not really necessarily sure. Um, I just think that I understand myself better. I'm much more forgiving toward myself for certain things, much more understanding, like knowing, especially from the past life regression that I had with the guy, where he was like, take like a ailment or a flaw that you have, and let's find out where it comes from, right? And I went through a few of them, and each one of them had like a legit explanation that totally made sense. And it was like, oh, okay, and nothing came out of the guy's mouth. It all came out of my mouth, right? So like he would say, what do you see? How do you see it? Where are you? What do you smell? And things like that. And that would all come out of me. Um, and it was really interesting. It's like, okay, so this happens because of this, and this happens because of this, and this is because of that. And then it doesn't even matter. So it doesn't matter anymore.
Well, I think, you asked the question, how do we defend ourselves against this?
Avoid
You
the
know, I
pitfall.
think this might be a better one might be a stock investment analysis as a starting point, where let's say you invested in a stock and it was $100 a share and now it's dropped to $50 a share, and you're saying, I've lost so much money in this stock. I need to buy in, because I've lost so much money. But the reality is you've got to actually look at the evaluation of the future of where that stock is going. Because if the stock is going, if the fundamentals of the company are such that yes, it does have a future, or it's going to be making money, then it's probably a good investment to buy more stock in that company. But if the stock is going to continue down the thing, or the results of going from 100 to 50 were because mismanagement, and this is actually the true nature of the company, then you need to stop buying and sell right now. And that's kind of the thing, is it's really an evaluation of future potential, and being able to discern future potential better is really the key to getting out of the sunk cost fallacy.
But what if it's simpler than that?
Okay.
What if it's, how like all your power is like between like somewhere in here, between your heart and your brain, in your body, inside, all the solutions to all the problems, all of your tools, everything is inside, right? And so the simplest way, and when I wrote the title, this is what I was thinking about. The simplest way to avoid the sunk cost fallacy, or to avoid any kind of discomfort, or not discomfort as in effort, but discomfort as in like a rock in your shoe kind of thing, the thing that you're not willing to stop and examine, and you're just tolerating this pain or this discomfort for no reason. So yeah, pointless discomfort maybe is what I mean. And that's to watch your vibration, to create a vibration. And that's a struggle. Like for myself, it's a struggle because when I'm presented with challenges, life challenges, right? My mood goes whoo, whoo, whoo. My vibration goes whoo, whoo, whoo. And then I'm just like, right? And I'm not having a good time. Nobody else is around me is having a good time, and that's just what happens, right? So one way to deal with or to battle or to release all of this stress and pressure and everything is to have a truly high vibration and to enjoy your life. And the more you enjoy your life, the more you enjoy your life, the more opportunities come to enjoy your life, the more doors open for yourself, the more you're rejoicing at the amount of money you have, the more money you have, the more you rejoice at the relationships that you have. Like right now, I'm living in this complex. I don't know anybody here, but I have all of you guys, right? So I'm not lonely. I have lots of friends around me. And so just a matter of reframing situations sometimes can really help making one feel more loved. And the love needs to come from within. It's all about vibration. Who's with me on the vibration train? No? No?
Mm.
I get it. I like it. I like what you're saying.
What about choices and perspectives? Getting more perspectives.
Well,
I
that's
think
the same
getting
thing,
more
right?
perspective is always a good
If you
thing.
choose
Well,
your
if you're talking
vibration,
about the inside, how do you get more perspectives from the inside?
well, if you choose higher vibration, you will have higher perspectives. You'll see better options. But when you have a lower vibration, all the options you can see are the options that vibrate on the same vibration as you do. So if you're vibrating over here, the opportunities are all on this plane. But if you're vibrating over here, there are all different opportunities and options that are available to you.
But wouldn't you need like another example to kind of compare? Because, somebody that says they got a high vibration might be very low to somebody else.
Of course.
Also,
Well, that's
low
true.
vibrations can be useful. Like anger can be motivational. That's
Yeah,
something.
so Abraham Hicks has this like emotional guidance scale that you can download somewhere. And so if anger is the vibration that's higher to where you're at right now, it's a useful vibration. But if it's lower to where you're at, then it could be taking you in the wrong direction. So you can always go up to and all the way to the top where is love, just pure love, right?
When you say vibration, the way I'm perceiving that is it's just my energy. Like if I'm in
Yeah,
maybe a mood where I'm feeling that's the energy I'm bringing to,
yeah, you're
that's
resonant.
basically. I'm sorry.
You're the way you're resonating with the world.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
like when you're in a good mood, then the mailman says hello and the dog licks your
Oh no,
hand,
I
and
understand that.
you
Yeah,
get
no, I want to
coffee.
make sure that I'm
Yeah,
understanding where. So well, sometimes you have you bring we one can bring their energy to the table, and it's just you're dealing with outside forces that it's just how you bring to it. So it's yeah, I guess it depends on yeah. No, but
yeah,
I
but that's
understand what you're
what.
saying.
Yeah, that's why the war is an inner war, and the battle is an inner battle, because you're always, especially these days, there's always an onslaught of external things that is designed to squash you, and it's up to you to stay up high, 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 as high as you can to
Well,
really
I
keep
mean,
yourself happy.
well, for me, it's being honest with it. Because I'll take it. I mean, whatever. I mean, I don't contend with it. If I have to, as for me, it's like I can be with it. You know, what are you gonna do? Like, what's gonna happen? If as long as I'm honest with whatever the energy is, wherever it's coming from, I could be with that in that moment, and I can like that's for me being responsible. I'm able to respond to whatever it is in the moment. I mean, sometimes maybe I'll be tired or dragged, but I try not to fight with it too much because I don't want to get myself caught up in like, you know what I mean? Because I could fight, I could beat the shit out of myself, all in contending with stuff like that. So I
I'm
kind of
big
just try. It's my only way of just addressing it honestly, I guess, for myself. You know.
I'm big on arguing with reality. When things are not to my liking, I tend to argue with reality before I accept reality eventually.
Oh, Adam, I think you're muted.
Yeah, Adam, you're muted.
So there's this really cool quote that I did, and I made a meme from Gigi Allen, and it says, I think that too many people are worried about death, and they're worried about, everybody's afraid of this and afraid of that, and who gives a fuck? I mean, you end up worrying, and who gives a shit? Just you.
Oh, just what? You froze or you cut out. You might have to finish that. There is no sound right now, Adam.
I think the last word he said is you, just you. Who gives a shit? It's just you. No one else. Is that right?
No, it's just like overcoming fears was the underlying thing in that, like just confronting your fears and living instead of living in fear. Instead of letting fear rule your life, you start making the decisions instead of your fears making them. I mean, he was an extreme guy, but I don't agree with a lot of the stuff he did, and it was kind of gross. But that quote really just resonated with me, and I just felt the need to make a meme out of it, so I did.
Well, like I'll tell you, when I was in the corporate world, I was making a 6-figure income. I was kind of on the top side of the industry. I had a reputation for getting a lot of things done, and I decided to quit that and go on to something else. I don't necessarily know that I had any more energy. I just had little energy for doing what I was doing. I didn't like the people that I was working with. I didn't like what the results were for, I wasn't contributing to, positive outcomes. I was contributing to negative outcomes, and I was basically taking from, the least and giving to the most, people with the most. And so it was a negative experience that I said, I just don't want anything more of. I didn't have that energy, like in this particular experience. It took me 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, I think it was maybe even 8 years before I found something else that was interesting to me that, ignited my passion again.
What exactly was that?
Freedom, anarchy,
Yeah.
Acapulco.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like remind me. I forget the poet's name, but it was what Adam was saying earlier. He said, "Death is a rumor of the living." You know.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely fear is definitely a controlling mechanism, but I don't know if it actually really plays a part. I think to some degree it plays a part because it is kind of a scarcity mentality that the sunk cost fallacy revolves around. But I'm not so sure it's confronting fear so much as
Going with your
just,
heart.
well, just like valuing the effort that you've made. It's like it's being wasteful, I guess, is maybe another way that I think I heard it described, that you put all this time in and now you're just going to throw that all away. To a lot of people that's considered wasteful.
Mm-hmm.
But it's wasteful to like not follow your heart. It's wasteful to spend 20 years in a corporate job that doesn't make your heart sing. That's what's wasteful.
I guess I'm sorry. What is it called again? Pardon me. It's sunk cost. Sunk cost.
Sunk cost fallacy.
Because it's
Like
The ship sinks, right?
Oh, I got you. I got you. Because I guess I think it's it's the outcome. It's like if I have it's the only reason I'm losing is if the fixed idea I have of the outcome. Like if we're talking about a journey, if I'm going to a journey and then I find out, oh shit, what I'm doing is not really what I want to be doing, I just learned about it. So how would I understand that if I didn't go through that process of, I may have, so yeah, I guess, yeah.
Well, but that's one of the things is maybe an assumption that we know where we're going. To a large degree, like if you're a slave and you don't know anything else other than being a slave, you're not going to be able to know that you could be a CEO, or something really, your own, you could be an entrepreneur that's very successful, let's say.
But I don't know if I agree with that, because in my lifetime, every single stupid thing that I've ever experienced led me somewhere. Even if it was like a side job, like once for 4 months, I worked at a graphic design company for whatever, no reason at all. And then I went back to being like in oil and gas. But that 4 months really was significant and instrumental to my career as a marketing person 20 years later. And it was just like a stupid 4 month job that I didn't like. It was completely out of my career path, yet it was so important. And so I don't think that we're ever off the path. I think whatever path we're on, we're always on the path. And it's just a matter of accepting what is, not arguing with reality, having a good time, and moving towards your highest outcome, whatever makes your heart sing.
And I guess keeping in mind the world around us too, to a degree, so that maybe you can enjoy both, where you're being your higher self and enjoying doing it for yourself, but you also at the same time give back to others.
Yeah, absolutely. Giving back to others is part of being your highest self, because there's nothing more rewarding than being of service to others and helping others,
That's a good point.
right?
Yeah, and I think that's what I think Bobby was suggesting, and I think that's one of the things that I think I'm suggesting too. It's not only our own journey. There's also a journey of the community, the group of people around us that we contribute to through our own actions and our example.
Of course, that's why we
Like
start so many podcasts.
that's how we give people that other perspective, that maybe like, oh, I don't have to be a slave anymore. Wow, that opens up some new ideas.
But do we give it to them, or do we offer it to them?
We offer
Right.
it to them.
Because it's up to
I mean,
them.
being an example doesn't mean I have to. I don't force my example on anybody else. They just observe it, right?
Yeah.
I don't force that on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You kind of just put it out there.
Exactly. And whoever's attracted to it is the person who's ready to take that step, who's on that path, in that stage of their journey. And the other people may be in a different stage of their journey, and that's okay too. It's okay to be on whatever stage of the journey. And it's okay to have emotional reactions to the journey as it comes along, because that's
isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting though that that's kind of one of the things that we are kind of built to do. We don't have an inherent fear in communicating with other people up until we have this institutional experience where we fear communicating and expressing our own feelings about where we're at.
Yeah, I've never experienced that.
That suggests a lot of the experience that we're having is a result of, the fears that have been ingrained into us. And that the more that we, that we kind of understand the tribal element of our experience, probably the better off we're going to be.
I have a question for someone.
For whom?
Michael, you were mentioning trauma earlier in our conversation here today. Would you describe being born as a human child, a human birth, as a traumatic experience for that child?
Well, there's always the possibility, because there's a lot of things that go into trauma. And certainly, I think Bob Podolsky's soul bonding book does a pretty good job of it. But there's one that's called "The Body Keeps the Score." It doesn't necessarily have to be some violent or traumatic, or I don't want to say traumatic. It doesn't have to be any particular experience that causes trauma. It can just be the perception of a kind of a, what does he call it? Like a no-win situation where you got to make a choice, a choice between two bad outcomes. And that alters your behavior or justifies the altering of your behavior.
I believe you said something, trauma may be obscuring something in a person's life. And I thought, what about being born? I can imagine that it would be traumatic, right? The child in a warm environment where everything is seemed to be taken care of. You're not really breathing because the oxygen's coming through the blood transfer between you and your mother. She's
Yes.
eating and she's feeding you. You don't even have to open your mouth and suck on a nipple. It's all being going through the umbilical cord. Then you're removed and then you're like, oh, I gotta breathe now, and all this stuff. And we don't have the children are not able to speak as we are now of their experience. Why did you do that? It was great in there. But I got a feeling that it is traumatic, but I don't believe that we would feel we are, it's obscuring the joy that we have. I don't think that birth gets in the way of our life. I think it's a part of it. It helps us get. So I'm gonna, because of what you had said today, I'm now going to reevaluate all my trauma or whatever I was describing as trauma now in a different way because of you.
Well, like the birth that that I think that most of us understand as being born these days is probably pretty traumatic in comparison to what could be. I'm no expert on this, but I did. There was somebody here that had like an in-home birth where they had like the pool, and it was like a super low trauma birth where as soon as the baby came out, she just got hugged by the mother, and they just had this like the placenta and the umbilical cord were kept together with the baby for I guess a few days, and it just kind of dropped off by itself to some degree. And so there's, I'm like, again, I'm no expert in this, but from my understanding, there's a lot of different ways that you can go about birthing that is a lot less traumatic than, what we consider a modern birth. So, I think, how we go about dealing with situations, and I think this could be a good example, it's also one of the ways that we can, reduce the amount of trauma that we're facing for each other, by understanding that when people are having problems, that we should be very gentle with each other, when it comes to, and I know I'm really bad at that, but
I think if I may, like I think we maybe like of recent events. I think we need to understand trauma. We throw words around like what is trauma. I mean, for me, like a birth, and it's not to be in comparison, like yeah, I mean, there's things in life that are naturally bring natural pain. For me, my understanding of trauma is that it's something that is abrupt and unnatural. Well, like it's something that maybe has a degree of a nature of violence in a degree. It could be emotional or physical, but it's out of the norm. It's out of, you know what I mean? It could be a car accident. I remember it. Uh, people, I know my own understanding of like dealing with that type of, it's like how you deal with. That's my thing of contention. I think I understand it with how the reaction of it. You know what I mean? I don't know. That's my experience with it. Like people talk about, from my understanding, trauma, the reaction is almost like a form of denial. A trauma is like when a trauma experience happens. It depends how I deal with it. It's like I can have a degree of trauma. If it's an extended degree of trauma, maybe that's when some suggest like PTSD, and this idea is because I protect myself mentally. So I in like a long term trauma, I protect like as anybody, I guess, as a military guy, I'm not sure if someone's in an experience where it's an extended violent experience. you go into survival mode. So in survival mode, your brain is clicking off, okay, I'm going to get through this. So all these things are going to be put aside. So those things that we create those patterns in our brain. So then maybe when we come out of that experience, and I heard this experience from a military dude, right? And he was talking about PTSD, and he said he was everything was fine, and the next thing he remembered, he was on top of this guy's car banging his thing. I mean, that's an extreme. It's an extreme. But he had an event that he we protect ourselves in different ways. That I guess that's what I'm explaining. We in trauma we protect ourselves in different ways as a defense mechanism, and then it acts out in times when we're defending ourselves when it doesn't need to be defended. I don't know. That's my. I don't mean to go on, but that's my idea of trauma is that it's I observe it in the reaction because
Yeah.
that's what makes us think about it. I think, and that's it affects our natural being, or maybe someone else's. And I think that's to be compassionate of that is to understand it to a degree. It's only from my own.
All right, well, maybe I'll try this again. So like a double bind or a catch 22, when you're kind of in a situation where you don't know what's better and you have to make a choice. That's essentially what Bob Podolsky explains as some of the basic double binds that create the character structures in children at a young age
Mhm.
that create different personality or character structures
Sure,
that they
sure.
adopt. The thing is they don't want to relive that PTSD,
Yes. Yeah.
that moment when they don't know what to do and they
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
make a decision to do
Mhm.
something. And of course, when you're a child, your brain development is really just getting started. And so
Sure.
this
Sure.
is why, for the most part, this happens before you're 5 years old,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
because your brain hasn't really gotten to a point that it is developed enough
Yeah.
to make better decisions or take better
Sure. Sure.
observations.
May I don't mean to go on, but how I understood that is in communication because I remember I know from my background, like people who have normal maybe no develop this is way as babies, right? Communication. You may have a baby in the hand, and the father or whoever is the caregiver was hey blah 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 blah. Hey, if that's given with love, it's with facial expressions. It's feeling. There's love being communicated in the communication with the smile, with the face.
Yeah,
But there are situations. I think this was where the person doing that is not necessarily love that child,
right.
and that smile is being communicated in a different way. I understand this so later on in life, there are people that we may judge that may not be naturally social. But what happens is that smile, where someone would come in the room and see that smile and be like, oh, I'm in a safe place. A person who may have that degree of trauma may have that smile and say, oh no, I have to think twice about being in this situation because of the experience of that. And I think that's where am I what you're saying with yeah, it becomes part of development. It's very different. Yeah, it's a very
Well,
definitely.
what I was going to say is when they don't want to remember that, the brain basically creates the circumstance that it creates amnesia so that you don't remember that
Yeah. I'm sorry, I
situation.
don't mean
So
to go on. Maybe I went on. Maybe I shouldn't have went on. Pardon me.
but that's why a lot of people, like trauma hides a lot of things because
Mhm.
people create amnesia in their own mind and then they
Yeah.
don't remember. And the thing is with the childhood experiences, these traumas, essentially are like, for a baby or an infant, like their life or death kind of fear. And,
Mhm.
and so, like what's going on now where they're creating traumatic experiences, in a lot of cases, people are subconsciously kind of attaching the trauma that they're feeling now as an adult to the trauma that they're experiencing as a child. And that's that fear of death that they're really leveraging, in the current circumstance with a lot of people. And so, you see people snapping to obediently, but it's probably because they have, some really deep childhood traumas that are being
Sure.
triggered by the current traumas.
Yeah, it's easy to take out the shame stick to get people in line.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
I don't think that you went on, James. You can go on as long as you want. This is a group
Apart, yeah. I
discussion,
don't mean
not a
I don't
monopoly.
mean it's sensitive. I don't want to. I respect the space.
It's all good. It's all good. This is what we were doing from the beginning. We were like going around the circle and asking each other questions on the topic, but just taking different perspectives and viewpoints.
I'm no expert, by the way. I just read a lot of books, and of course, I know Agnieszka and Willow, and Tim, and all those other guys that were involved with Raising Excellence, and we've gone over a lot of these subjects in depth in our discussions and all of the shows that we've done over the past year. So to some degree, a lot of that, a lot of my understanding, and then I spent a couple years working with Bob on like a weekly basis. I edited and did the foreword for his book on soul bonding. So, to some degree, I've got that background, but I am not.
All background is very valuable.
Well,
But I think Lee wanted to say something.
Sure.
I grew up getting the belts, like, hit with like a leather belt after being told kind of thing that this is the reason why you're getting this punishment. And I don't really like doing this. And, the guy would do it anyway, my father. And I could see the anger in him, such anger. And so I quickly didn't respect any of that process at all. I just wanted to avoid it. And then as I grew up and I became aware of what other people suffered, not only my sister, seeing her reduced to tears, a hand was never laid on her physically, but shouting and all kinds of like high intense, again, anger was directed at her from, very young age, right up into teenage and womanhood. And I can tell you today, she has never married a man. She has married women twice. Now, I cannot give you 100% proof that that is the reason why, but I would say the probability is rather high. Um, you know, and then, so then I would look at other people around in life, and then and then I became aware of some of the stories that my girlfriends and women told me. The first long-term adult relationship I had was with a woman named Julie, and she told me, like, after we'd been together for a week, she was in tears and she said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I went to see my ex-boyfriend, also strangely enough named Lee, and he raped me, and he wouldn't stop, and I told him to stop." And then I was like, "Oh my God." And I'm like, you can't feel bad about that. That is not your fault, of course. And don't worry about me not wanting to be with you after experiencing that. Or no, of course not. You know, I'm so sorry that you had to go through it. I asked her, "Do you want me to go find that guy and beat the fuck out of him?" She's like, "No, no, don't. I just want to step away from that completely." And then I started to think about what women go through. And then I learned about other experiences that other women communicated to me. And I thought that that was the definition of trauma and violence. And that what I had gone through was a lesser thing and not something that I should even think is tough. It was not, then I would be like a crybaby to discuss the things that I didn't enjoy in that family setting as a child. But from today's discussion, I'm thinking now about trauma as a rebirth. And that's what I would say to someone. I would say, you are never going to be the same. And maybe that's great. And maybe you can think of it in terms of you are reborn and your life begins again anew. And that thing is not something to hold you back, but perhaps to help you step forward, because you're doing that. And since I'm talking to you, I know you're alive and I can see you breathing. And so you might have things in your mind that are holding you back in that place, in that time where you are suffering or you are experiencing something extremely challenging. But your body and you and your heart is beating, you're going forward already. So maybe you can go along with that and take it as a birth, so to speak.
I don't think we can compare traumas just because your parents like didn't do A, but they did B. That doesn't mean that you don't get sympathy or you don't get to, talk about it like it wasn't like traumatic because somebody else did something else to somebody else. Like your experience is your own, and you how traumatic things are depends what happened before, right? Like I remember this one time, a traumatic event in my life, and it was like so mild. But I really suffered. Like I was 5 and I was at my grandma's house and there was a bowl of fruit on the table and I grabbed a pear and my aunt yelled at me really severely and said it was not my fruit and it was not my pear and I wasn't allowed to touch it. And it was weird because I was allowed to touch it every other time, but suddenly this time I wasn't allowed to touch it. It had something to do with guests coming over or something. But I didn't understand as a 5-year-old the difference between the bowl of fruit every day and the bowl of fruit on like the special occasion or whatever. And she was so mean, and I still feel like cringiness inside my body from it. But it was so mild. It was such a stupid thing. Oh, you touched a piece of fruit and your aunt it didn't even yell at me. She just spoke really sternly to me and like basically, well, she kind of made me feel like a piece of dirt. Like, who are you to touch the fruit? This is for the guests. Get out of here and don't be underfoot and get out. And like she was talking to me as if I was lesser than, and that really bothered me because I always felt I was equal because my parents brought me up as equal to other humans. And so for me, that was a traumatic event. Whereas somebody else who's used to being beaten, if they just got sternly talked to, they'd be like, oh, wow, that was like, I got off easy. That was great. It's just, I wasn't used to it. Bye, Adam.
Back to sunk cost fallacy. I would connect that in my mind to fear. I've done this. I may not have more of this. I may have lost this or that. I may have not another chance.
Yeah, a
So
finite amount of years or
yeah.
money
Yeah,
or
that's right. Right. Like someone, the mother of my children said, we're not getting any younger. I'm like, I'd rather not keep going with this fear of I'm not going to be this or I'm not going to be, I'd rather be instead like I could be a lot of this. There could be a lot more of that.
But realistically speaking, you're only like less than 50 years old, and that means you have at least another 50 in you. I mean, the medicine is not going to get any worse over the next 50 years. So I don't expect us to
Hold
live
on about that one.
to 70. The medicine that we involve ourselves in. I mean, there's probably going to be other witchcraft medicine that we don't participate in, but that's a different story. This is intellectual, enlightened people who don't mess with Satan stuff. Oops, did I say Satan? I meant inappropriate stuff.
I if I like, I think for me, from my limited experience with this stuff, I think in talking about trauma, I think we're able to take not with control, but we can be responsible with our own if we understand how we're reacting to that. I mean, I mean, that's for my, observing my own reaction is kind of, I think a way of, getting to that place, at least for me, little by little understanding how I may react or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I think again, I want to reiterate the idea that the most difficult trauma is the trauma that we don't know about. And the trauma that we do experience ties back to that, but we don't necessarily know that, So that's one of the things that, one of the reasons that I think Bob's soul bonding is important, but, certainly psychotherapy, certainly what Agnes, now I just can't even say your
He
name
forgot my
anymore
name
without
this last weekend, and he's not
thinking.
been able to say it first. He said it correctly for a full year before that,
But
no problem. But
with their
suddenly,
with their somatic therapy and stuff, being able to read your face and kind of give you some clues as to what's going on in your inside, because in a lot of ways, the attitudes that we have are a result of things that we don't necessarily aren't necessarily conscious of. but they still reflect in our face and in our body. And like I'll give you an example. She told me, she's like, "Oh, your legs are a lot skinnier than I thought." What? And it essentially suggests that I was neglected or I felt neglected when I was a child. And I had to really think about that, in depth to really understand. Yeah, that's probably true.
It was pretty obvious though when you told me the story about your mom.
Yeah.
Like you just say it briefly. Do you want me to say it?
Well, when I was, I think, like 14, 15 months old, actually 13 months old, my younger brother was born. And then 4 months later, he died of SIDS. And so, right in that year and a half range, my mother was distraught. And she remained distraught for many years afterwards. But to me, that was one in which, as a child, I can reflect on being, very careful about upsetting my mother, in any way, shape, or form. If I'm playing and I knock something over or something like that, or do anything, it could be anything. Just ask a question, and she could lose it. So I had to be really gentle and quiet. And of course, that I think the positive side of that is I'm very reflective and I'm very observant. But the negative side is I felt neglected.
I feel like it's a shame that my family and I couldn't have had more times to sit and talk through all those kinds of things that you just described. I talked to my mother 2 days ago, and she encouraged me in what I'm doing. Send me $100, and
Nice.
and I she said, "Yeah, I think you got good things coming for you, and I'm proud of you what you're doing." And I says, "Yeah, I've done so many struggles, and I've made a lot of things that made life difficult for myself. I did not take the easy road. Although I've heard from my father that that I kind of like failed in all these things, like never graduated from university, because he saw that as a really important
But you
milestone.
graduated now
Yeah, that's what I also
from
expressed to my
University of
mother, that this
Reason.
is the one that I mattered to me. I didn't care about Trent University in Ontario, Canada. I didn't care about Kainan University in Taoyuan, Taiwan. But when I graduated from autonomy, that was an important thing in my life. So I wish, like I wanted quite often to have gone and had a sit with my father and have a beer at a bar and then talk about some of those things. But we did have discussions like that. I realize now that there were some, and there was one in particular. We discussed this book that had to do with past lives. A doctor wrote down in this book many stories that people had that expressed their knowledge of who and what they were doing on the other side before their birth. And we talked about that. And I remember him crying, and we both thought that we both read the same book, which is a rarity in our life.
Was that the Moody, R. Moody, or whatever book?
Maybe I would have to look at the cover to see.
I read it in Polish when I was like 9, but I think it sounds like it.
Hmm.
Well,
So
ladies and gentlemen,
the
go
times
ahead,
that
Kurt.
people were going off to work, mother and father working full time, or children off to school. Imagine instead if we had been in a village, and then I could just wander across the glade of grass to where my father was building or forging horseshoes, or my mother was weaving baskets instead, and then talked about those things. It's a shame. A lot of families. And now, with people being forbidden to visit their own family members, even if you live in the same freaking town, what's such a shame, because I think that these human relationships are just so wonderful. Anyway, thanks.
In Polish, we have a proverb that if somebody sneezes while you speak, it must be truth. So there you go. It must be true. But we've been talking for a while, and I think this is a good place to maybe at least shut down the Facebook Live. We can continue to chit chat for a few more minutes. But yeah, thank you everybody for on YouTube for listening, and I think this was a good discussion. I enjoyed